Hello again, friends. This is a deck profile for Megacolony V. Before I get too in-depth into the individual cards in the list, I do feel like it's important to address a few things. The first thing is that I am running 2 starters. In certain matchups, you will want to run Machining Worker Ant, such as against Excel decks and Kagero, and in other matchups you'll want to run Jocular Cicada. A lot of people think that it's scummy to have 2 starters and switch between them based on the matchup, especially if you know what your opponent's going to play. However, it is an option that the game itself gives you, and as long as the game gives you that option, I don't see why it's scummy if you're giving yourself the advantage by running the extra card so that you can have that advantage. Especially since Vanguard can be played best 2 out of 3, and switching in that starter against the decks where you need it to be there in the second game and third game is actually very, very powerful and can even switch the game wildly in your favor. In addition to that, this deck runs 11 grade 1s. I have never run a deck with so few grade 1s. I don't recommend people play decks with 11 grade 1s typically, but this deck has the ability to call both a grade 0 and a grade 1 from Soul when it first plays Stag Beetle in order to get 2 boosters out. So it really doesn't need extra boosters so much in that sense. In addition to that, Spark Hercules makes such ridiculous numbers by just moving a unit to Soul that you don't need to have a grade 1 behind him. And even if all of that wasn't true, Spark Hercules' skill also enables you to give 5,000 power to all units on your board. So even if you had to swing unboosted, it wouldn't be a problem, but that's never going to happen because this deck has the ability to fish so well that you're not going to be lacking boosters, at least when Spark Hercules is ready to go live. So I wanted to preface this video with all of those things first so that they didn't need it to be discussed on the individual cards. We're going to go ahead and cover the individual cards now. The first card we have is Jocular Cicada. When this unit would be called a rearguard circle, it's called at rest. When it attacks, triple this unit's power until the end of that battle, and at the end of the battle, retire this unit. The increase that's tripled also includes the boost. So we're talking about a card that's 42k with an 8k booster. In addition to that, if you use Spark Hercules, he is 72k against either a 7 or an 8k Vanguard. Use Butterfly Officer, and he is 102k with just 1 card called from hand and using your Vanguard skill and having a booster. So this card is actually absolutely ridiculous at making large numbers and ending games. That's why I use him as a starter in matchups where I'm not worried about dying and I'm more worried about killing my opponent. So that's why this card is an optional starter in the matchups that I suggested. However, you will want to run Machining Worker Ant when wrote upon draw a card against decks that can either snipe Jocular Cicada or that will have the ability to rush down your face super easily if you don't have enough cards to protect yourself. And all you really need to beat an Excel deck is to just ride Spark Hercules and use its skill, and then you're stabilized. It's that easy. So with that being said, Machining Worker Ant is better against those decks because you're not going to need Jocular Cicada to finish off Nova Grapplers. They don't have shield anyway. One other consideration, as I mentioned earlier, with Stag Beetle, you will be calling Jocular Cicada on your first turn. Sometimes, if you have boosters, you'll call Jocular Cicada in a grade 2. Or if you have Water Gang, you're going to want to draw cards anyway, so call Jocular Cicada and Water Gang. Now, you'll want to use grade 3 to be boosted by Jocular Cicada, so you're still hitting 18k. But hitting numbers is not a problem. It's not a problem at all. So you just use Jocular Cicada and get a lot of benefit from it. Moving on to the triggers, we have, oh hey, it's not an Excel clan. For grade 1s, we have 11 grade 1s, I already mentioned that. But we have a bit of a competition for which card should be set at 4. Should it be Butterfly Officer or Spiteful Hopper? Butterfly Officer's skill is when she's placed, you can rest her. If you do, choose up to one of your other units, and it gets 10,000 power until end of turn. If you chose, at the end of turn, put that unit into your soul and countercharge 1. To specify, when I said units, it should have been rear guards. Now, Butterfly Officer is a countercharge in a deck that really needs countercharge. And not only that, she's conditionless. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to have any other requirements met. She will just unflip for you on demand. And that is very, very useful. And I would say that she's worth running at 4 if I had the space for her. And honestly, she's worth running at 4 because I would like to see her more often. However, I want to see Spiteful Hopper earlier, and that's why I'm running him at 4. Spiteful Hopper's skill is, when placed, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your other units. It gets 6,000 power until end of turn. If you have no face-up cards in your damage zone, countercharge 1. He is a conditioned countercharge and has a comparable effect, but he has a much, much larger body. Now, the reason why I like Spiteful Hopper is because he doesn't have to make me go minus in order to get the countercharge, but I do have to have all of my damage face down. I like to see him on turn 2. If my opponent, say, goes second, they ride a grade 1, and then it's my turn. If I ride Machining Mantis, counterblast 1, because they only did 1 damage to me, check top 6, get the grade 3, call Spiteful Hopper, Soul Blast out 1 card, and then give Mantis another 6,000 power, attack their Vanguard with Hopper. Now even a trigger's not going to stop Mantis's attack. So Spiteful Hopper has those other facets that make it a valuable card to play early game. And it's very easy to cap out your damage when you have 1 or 2 damage, especially if you get Water Gang early. So being able to have that option on demand during the main phase can be useful when you want to call out a Mantis and get some more cards in order to be able to use your combo next turn if you don't have it set up or secured. So the real difference is that you need Spiteful Hopper early, even though you don't want to see him as much late game, and you can also call him from Soul, so he's not as useful late game. But because you need to see him early, you don't have any other choice than to run more copies of him. So that's why he's at 4 and why Butterfly Officer is at 3. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Machining Hornet. Machining Hornet's skill is when an attack hits that it attacked or that it boosted, then, well, when an attack hits a Vanguard, I should specify, then you may check the top 6 cards of your deck for a grade 3. If one of them exists among those 6 checked cards, then you can add it to your hand. If a card was added, and if this card is on rear guard, you may move it to Soul. Machining Hornet is your preferred grade 1 ride if you go second, because he can compensate for the disadvantages that going second brings by giving you a free card if he hits, and that's the time that he is most likely to hit when he's attacking. Otherwise, he's still a very, very valuable card because you just stick him in the back row, and then he will eventually get moved to Soul in order to check for a grade 3, and he will only get moved to Soul when you successfully get a grade 3. And that grade 3 is probably going to be a Stag Beetle, and you're going to use that Stag Beetle to call him back. So this deck is very, very combo-based and works very well with each of the pieces fishing for each other and getting them back out so that you can do it again. And that's what I was meaning by this being just a raw combo deck now. Machining Hornet is just ridiculous. Moving on to the grade 2s, we have 11 grade 2s. That's fairly standard. We have 3 copies of Bloody Hercules. When placed, Soul Blast 1. This unit gets 6,000 power until end of turn. When its attack hits, you get to countercharge 1 and give another one of your units 6,000 power. Bloody Hercules is a crazy, crazy good card. You can use it when your opponent's at 4 damage, swing it into a rear guard, and then you're guaranteed to get that countercharge, or they have to expend shield blocking that attack, and then you attack with your Vanguard, and you have critical pressure on that attack that could end the game, so they're going to have to guard your Vanguard, and then if you do hypothetically hit that critical trigger, they're going to have to guard your other rear guard. So you're either going to benefit from his effect, and it's going to make your other rear guard gain 6,000 power, which is an extra stage, possibly 2, and you're going to get the countercharge, or your opponent's going to have to deal with guarding Bloody Hercules' attack, which is going to be fairly strong. So this card is just extremely versatile and able to do a whole lot. And I would love to see this card at 4. Same with Butterfly Officer. However, Water Gang has the same justification for being at 4 that Spiteful Hopper does. I need to see this card early. When this card stands, I can counterblast 1 and move it to Soul, and then draw 2 cards. Water Gang is a monster of card advantage. All you have to do is get 1 Water Gang out, and then use a combination of Stag Beetles, Hell Demises, Spark Herculeses, or just putting it behind your Vanguard and waiting for your next turn to get it to pay off. And it's very easy to do that. So Water Gang has a natural predator, and that would be Kagero. If your opponent is playing Kagero, you have to stand Water Gang during your turn in order to get the cards from it. But you could just as easily call Water Gang out behind your Vanguard and just say, okay, now you have to snipe it. So it's also a catch-22 card. He is such a high priority target that your opponent is going to have to get rid of him. Because if they don't, let's say you have this bad boy in the front row, attack with Water Gang at your opponent's Vanguard. They have to get rid of your Water Gang, otherwise when it stands, you're going to draw 2 cards. He's just a ridiculous card. And your opponent is always going to feel the pressure of Water Gang being out whenever it is. So Water Gang, great card. I feel like Trump now. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Machining Mantis. When placed, you counterblast 1, look at the top 6 cards of your deck. If there's a grade 3 among them, add it to your hand, and then shuffle your deck. This card gets 6,000 power until end of turn. This card, unlike Hornet, does not need any conditions to search your deck for grade 3s, which is why it costs a counterblast. And using his counterblasts early and then unflipping them with Spiteful Hopper is kind of the crux of how you make the deck work. You can also call him again off of Stag Beetle, and you can see what I mean about this being a combo deck where all of the pieces really work well together. In addition to that, he also gives himself 6,000 power, and I need to bring up that 6,000 power thing. Mantis, Hercules, Spiteful Hopper all give 6,000 power. If you have a 9,000 power grade 2 and an 8,000 power booster, then 6,000 power is going to bring you up from 17k to 23k. 23k is a magic number against force decks, and with Spark Hercules, it's going to effectively be 38k. So that is a very, very potent ability to give yourself 6,000 power, or to give yourself 6,000 power, or to give another unit 6,000 power. So the deck has the capacity to just absolutely rip into force decks. Moving on, we have 2 copies of Hell Demise. Hell Demise's effect is, when placed, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and rest it, and stand one of your rear guards. That's a very, very nice effect because it combos with Stag Beetle, and you can also just call a Butterfly Officer and then stand it with this if you happen to miss Spark Hercules by some miracle. Or, you know, you could just use it when you call it from Stag Beetle's soul to stand Butterfly Officer and then rest Butterfly Officer in order to give a unit 10,000 power and move it to soul and unflip, and then stand everything with Spark Hercules so you don't actually feel penalized for having rested all of those units. So this card works very well just for its first skill, with the rest of the deck's focus on combo play. In addition, its second skill isn't bad either. All of your opponent's rear guards in the back row in the same column as this unit cannot stand during your opponent's stand phase. But that's really just icing on the cake. The first skill is what makes a combo play work and what gives the deck extra versatility to make Water Gang happen earlier and to give Butterfly Officer extra plays if you don't feel like spending 2 counterblasts for Spark Hercules, which often it's not the right play, especially early in the game. Moving on, we have Machining Stag Beetle. He is exactly the same as before, only he also works on rearguard but doesn't gain the power. And he's got 12,000 power and protect, of course, but, you know, pretty much the same card. But its original effect was so crazy that it was a really good card then. And with Spark Hercules' ability to stand everything, there is no longer a disadvantage. It's just a free 2 rear guards from your soul. It's just, it's crazy. It's crazy, it's free, it's crazy. And that is essentially Machining Stag Beetle in a nutshell. He combos with absolutely everything in the deck, really, and he's the crux of what makes the deck work. So when Machining Mantis and Machining Hornet are searching these bad boys out, you just get a bunch of free cards. He's also the reason why Megacolony doesn't lose to Kagero, because Kagero's like, ha, I'm going to retire that card, and I'm going to retire that card, and then Megacolony's like, okay, here's 3 more cards. I just called 1 card from hand, but I get 3 more cards. So Stag Beetle, just an absolute ridiculous beast. And the final card is, of course, Machining Spark Hercules. First skill, Counterblast 2, choose all of your opponent's rear guards and rest them. Choose all of your rear guards and stand them. All of your rear guards get 5,000 power, all of your rear guards get 5,000 power. All of your opponent's units lose 5,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. I can't get it to focus. His other skill is move a grade 2 or less unit to soul, rear guard to soul. And if you do, he gets 5,000 power for each of your opponent's units at rest. So Spark Hercules, with his second skill, by minusing yourself for 1, he can easily be 42,000 power if your opponent has a full board. And his other skill, as already mentioned before, makes all of your units effectively 38k, assuming, you know, you just do the standard 6k boost. And will also make all of your opponent's units completely worthless on their next turn. Now, if your opponent doesn't care about that, if they have, say, a Soul Saver to counter this, if they're Spike Brothers and they can just move units to Soul and get them back with more power, if they have Deer to give their whole board plus 10k, so on and so forth. Tachikaze, they can retire their board. They don't even have a board anymore from last turn, and they're just going to call a new one. Then it's really not going to make as big of a difference in terms of defensive value, but the offensive value is still absolutely crazy. And all in all, it makes the deck extremely potent, because Spark Hercules is the reason why I'm not running Antlion. You don't need to have the Sentinel restrict when you have that much raw power swinging in every single turn, and with enough counter charge, which the deck has access to, you don't really need to spend, you don't really need to spend Counterblast on anything other than Spark Hercules once you get to the late game. And it just makes everything just fit together so nicely with his ability to stand everything, with all of your effects that are resting units such as Butterfly Officer, and calling units out with Stag Beetle. So all in all, this card finishes the deck out nicely, and it all works together so well. Of course, this is a Protect deck, so we have our Protect icons. And the ability to get Protect every single time you ride a grade 3 is invaluable, because you don't need Force. You don't need Force because all of your units are powerful enough. You don't need Excel because all of your units are powerful enough. So you just get free Perfect Guards every time you ride in a deck that has a bunch of free cards to just drop whenever they need to. So the deck doesn't really have anything that I would consider a weakness at this point compared to other V decks. And because of that, it really only loses to decks that are equally ridiculous, or decks that get lucky. And of course there are decks out there that are ridiculous. You have Sentinel restricting effects, and you have bonus criticals with Waterfall. You could do Waterfall Gaius, which is probably, if there was going to be a Kagura deck that countered this, it would be a Kagura deck that can consistently get Waterfall out and consistently get Gaius boosting it and trying to damage deny you. But I really don't see Kagura as having that as an option on the table consistently, because they don't have any mechanism with which to filter their cards, and they don't have much card advantage to be able to get the combo out. And if you can guard it once, you're probably fine and you're probably going to win. So honestly, Megacolony doesn't even have a really weak matchup to Kagura, which is one thing that people have been worried about. So all in all, I think the deck is just solid. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one.